So let me go to the demonstration. I'm going to flip over to my environment. And here I'm logged into Test Data Manager. I'm looking at my procurement project, right? So I have a TDM project or Test Data Manager project that's scoped to this procurement project that we're working on. And I've defined an environment. I have an environment called QAS. And in this environment, I have the ability to go ahead and do a data discovery. Now, I've already run the data discovery because this demo is in a shorter period of time. I've kind of pre-done this, but let me show you how that would work. So if I was going in and scanning the data model, I would select the QAS environment, or maybe it's a copy of production, for example. And then I would select my scan options, right? So in this particular case, I want to focus the scan. I don't want to discover all 160,000 plus tables in the environment because that's more information than I need to be able to provide the right data for the procurement testing, right? So what I want to do is include specific tables, right? So I want to focus on, and this is where I would, as a test data engineer, work with a SAP functional consultant to understand, okay, well, what tables from financial controlling and accounting, what tables from the master data tables do I need, right? And I would actually create a template to be able to either I could just manually do it here and define which tables I want, or I can do it by schema. I can do wildcarded characters, right? It doesn't have to be explicit names. And I can also save those as templates. So for example, I already had a template created for the procurement tables, and this is just from working with a functional consultant. And just to show you what that looks like, it's a pretty simple CSV file, just saying it's a table and I need this table, right? And it's a list, just giving me a straight list of tables that I want to include as a part of my discovery process. That's going to support, this what's in scope, right? The SAP tables that support the SAP modules for the procurement process, right? So essentially, once I have that, I can then focus my scan into this area and I can scan this. Now, the result of that scan is going to give me a data model um, that will allow me to understand what the data model looks like, what tables are involved, what are the columns, what are the primary keys. And then notice this, that we have relationships here, right? So if I'm looking at, this data model and I want to understand, well, what's all the related data? This is kind of an entity relationship view. I can click on, different tables and I can see what their downstream or related tables are, right? And you can see here, there's no foreign key definitions, right? But we've still automatically discovered 5 relationships, right, to other tables. So we'll go through, we have an algorithm in the tool that will analyze the data model, analyze the columns, look at column names and other attributes and try to discover relationships. If there's a relationship that doesn't look right or maybe needs to be added, you can go in and add relationships. I mean, or remove relationships, right? You have that ability. So the test data engineer can actually, if there's some logic in the business logic that's honoring the relationship, you can add relationships or modify relationships to support the test data management assets. Now, the important part is I can go in and review this model, right? I can look specifically, for example, at LFA1, right? I can filter down to that particular table. I can see it has relationships here defined. I can flip over. I can look at a more detailed view. I can zoom in on that, right? Um, and 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 understand what are the different downstream tables. And as you can see, as I click to some of the related tables, those tables are related to other tables, right? So there's a lot of related data here, right? And I can see that we discovered them. And the other feature that was talked about earlier, the masking, you can see we're tagging my PII data here for masking rules. That's not really part of my demo, but just to point that out as well. Um, so what I want to do is be able to leverage this information, right? So our discovery engine found these relationships. I want to be able to take those relationships and then be able to use them as a part of my subsetting process, right? Because that data integrity is important for subsetting this out. So I can come to my schema here. I can select this and I can actually export these relationships out to a file, right? So I can download those relationships And it's just a CSV file. I could take a look at this and basically what it's doing is creating a formatted file that defines all the relationships that were discovered. And what's nice about this file is now I can leverage it in our subsetting engine. So if I flip over to our data maker interface, you can see here I have my subsetting project I'm using for this demo. I can actually come into my project and I can say, look, table relationships, and I can look at the tables I've registered, and I can come over here and select this option to be able to import relationships from a file and press go, and then I can select this file and import them, right? I've already imported them just for time's sake because there are a lot of relationships and a lot of tables here. But now that I've imported them, I can leverage these relationships for my subsetting engine, right? So I've already defined a subset, again, for the sake of time, but I'll go ahead and show you what this looks like. So I'm going to open up data subset, and we'll take a look at what this looks like, right? So one of the things that's important about data subset is if you're going to import relationships into DataMaker, you need to turn on this configuration option. It says get tables, table list and foreign keys from repository. That's going to tell our subsetting engine to leverage the table list from that's registered in DataMaker. But I also have this ability to come into the utilities and say, look, copy the relationships, right? So copy from DataMaker to subset, right? So it'll allow me to be able to select a particular project and then copy those relationships that DataMaker has, right, that we imported from our discovery. I can fetch those relationships and then bring them into the subsetting engine, right? So now when I go in and I select, hey, I want a subset and I'm going to use LFA1, right, for business partners as my driving table. And then I want to be able to grab the data in LFA1 and all of its downstream related data, right? Anything that's related to it. And that way it can pull all that downstream data with it based on the criteria that I set. So when I look at the criteria, I have a query here that says select all from SAP HANA DB LFA1, right? And that's data subset would give that for me already. Where I add the additional criteria is based on the criteria that I care about. So where creation date is greater than 2019 and the SAP client is client 400, right? So I'm basically pulling all the business partner information greater than creation date of 2019 from the 400 SAP client, right? So that way I can get very specific data that meets my criteria, and I can run this, right? And it's going to show me what that might look like. I can get a little query here and it'll show me kind of what the data looks like. And I could go into each table and look at the downstream data and so forth. But once I'm happy with my definition, which is what I have now, what data subset will do for me is actually generate scripts that I can run or a DBA can run to be able to export the data from one environment and load it into another. So if I click, this little green play button, I can now then name my export. So I'll just call it EXP BP for business partner. And then I have some options here. So I can say I want to do it based on my data subset definition. So it's going to grab all these tables based on the relationships here. And if there's other tables, maybe unrelated tables from a relationship perspective, but maybe there's static data that needs to be brought along, I can select other tables here and just include them in the subset if I want to, which is very common. I can also tell it to, maybe there's constraints. I want to follow a particular order when I'm inserting the data. That will be important to be able to honor any constraints. So it inserts it all in a way that will honor those constraints. And also I have the ability to be able to drop and create indexes. So if that's something I need to do, I can select that option. But essentially I can basically generate that data or generate those scripts, and data subset will then now create me scripts that I can use if I have access to the database that I'm going to export from, or that a DBA could use to be able to do that work, right? So if I go look at, not my downloads, but my SAP folder, you'll see there's an export BP here folder, and then I have an export script and a load script, right? So the export script would be used by the test data engineer or the VBA to be able to export that data from the environment, right? So this basically builds the script needed to actually extract all the data from the environment. And then once you run the extract and that's successful, then you now have a script to be able to load that data into the target environment, right? So this is how we would leverage those relationships and everything we did from a discovery perspective to be able to use those relationships from for subsetting, right? And to make sure we're getting the right data integrity, and then focusing in on the specific tables that are important to us from a testing perspective.